had just returned home for the summer break, expecting peace but dreading the strained dynamic that had developed since Dad remarried. 2 years ago, he introduced us to her, young, striking, poised. I never asked how they met, but it was clear early on that they weren't built on love. More like appearance, convenience, or perhaps a need neither of them would admit aloud. Our conversations were short and polite. I called her by her name, never Mom. And she never asked me to. Dad was always working, either buried in meetings or flying out for business. He rarely noticed what was going on around him anymore. At dinner, he'd scroll through emails while she sat in silence across the table, chewing slowly, sipping wine, face unreadable. I watched them grow apart in real time, the tension becoming its own kind of background noise. I don't think they even fought anymore. They just stopped trying. She started talking to me more. At first, it was casual. Questions about school, books, films. But then she'd offer compliments that lingered strangely. You filled out since last year. Or, you remind me of your father when he was younger, but softer somehow. I tried not to think too much of it, chalking it up to a bored housewife making conversation. But I'd catch her watching me sometimes, eyes holding for a beat longer than they should. It made something stir in me. Confusion, curiosity, unease. She looked effortless at home, always in silk or loose cotton, barefoot and half glowing. I'd walk into the kitchen and she'd be there with her robe slipping down one shoulder, reaching for a glass. Sometimes she'd laugh at my reaction like she enjoyed watching me flinch. One day she knocked on my door and said the water heater in the guest bathroom was out, suggested I use the tub in the master suite. I hesitated, but she insisted, said she never uses it during the day and I might as well enjoy it. I sank into the steaming water, trying not to overthink. But then the door creaked. She stepped in casually, not even looking surprised to see me there. Said she just needed her face oil or something. I mumbled a reply, unsure where to look. She moved around the room slowly, her presence filling the space like perfume. She asked if the water was too hot. I said it was fine. She sat down on the edge of the tub, far too close for comfort, legs crossed, robe clinging damp to her thigh. We talked, if you could call it that. Small, weightless words. But the air was heavy with things unspoken. I felt frozen, like time stopped moving right. Her fingers traced a bottle on the ledge beside me, but she didn't look down. She looked at me. There was no seduction in her smile, just boldness. She didn't need to try. It was already working. I stayed still, not because I wanted to, but because I didn't know what would happen if I moved. The house felt different the next day, quieter in a way that wasn't physical. I went about my routine like nothing had happened, but my mind kept drifting back. Not to what was said, but how it felt. Her nearness, her gaze, the charged silence. I couldn't make sense of it. Maybe I'd imagined the tension. Maybe it was innocent. But I didn't believe that. That night, I heard a soft knock. I opened the door to find her holding 2 glasses and a bottle of wine. She said she couldn't sleep, asked if I minded some company. I hesitated, then stepped aside. She settled into the chair near my bed like it was perfectly normal, swirling the wine and asking about college as if nothing had changed. But her eyes held something sharper, something that watched more than it listened. She asked if I had a girlfriend. I said no. She smiled too knowingly, and said I must get attention. I told her I wasn't really looking. She tilted her head and said that's probably what makes me attractive, detachment. I didn't know how to answer that. There was a pause, not awkward, but filled with something heavier than words. She leaned forward slightly, robe parting at the chest, and said, almost in a whisper, that things aren't always what they seem in a marriage. I didn't respond. She kept going. She said Dad was different now. Cold. Absent. She didn't even feel like a wife anymore. Just a presence. Said the last time they were even physically close was months ago. I didn't want to hear it, but I didn't stop her. She kept her tone soft, vulnerable, like she was admitting things to herself as much as to me. She said I reminded her of how he used to be, before the distance, before the silence. That hit me harder than it should have. Her voice got lower. She said sometimes she forgot what it felt like to be noticed. Then she reached out and placed her hand lightly on my knee. Not teasing. Not suggestive. Just there. I looked at her, confused, cautious. She didn't move it. She just stared at me like she already knew what would happen next. I felt every part of me freeze and burn at the same time. My breath slowed. My thoughts didn't. It was like being caught in a current, unsure if you're drowning or floating. Her knee touched mine. Her body leaned just close enough for her breath to hit my neck. My pulse hammered against my throat. Then sudden footsteps from down the hall. We both stiffened. She stood, smoothed her robe without looking at me, and walked out quietly. The door clicked shut behind her. I sat in silence, heart pounding, staring at the untouched wine glass on the table. I didn't know what I had just let happen. I didn't know what would come next. But I knew nothing was innocent anymore. Not her words, not her touch, and definitely not the way I had let it all in. The morning sunlight felt too bright, too exposed. I avoided the kitchen, skipped breakfast, and stayed upstairs most of the day, pretending to be busy. Every sound felt amplified. The creak of the stairs, the hum of the fridge, the closing of doors. I couldn't focus. My mind kept dragging me back to the way her hand rested on my knee like it belonged there. I hated how much it stayed with me. I hated how much I didn't want to forget it. Later, she called out, asking if I could help her with something in the bathroom. I paused before answering, already knowing I should say no. But I didn't. I stepped inside, expecting something mundane. She stood there in a towel, hair still wet. Said she couldn't find a bottle under the sink and pointed vaguely toward it. I crouched down, searching, pretending the room wasn't thick with something unspoken. I found the bottle, stood, and turned to hand it to her. She didn't take it. She just looked at me, expression unreadable, then dropped the towel to the floor slowly, like the act itself was casual. Her eyes didn't move away from mine, not once. My body went still, but my pulse betrayed me. I held the bottle in my hand like it mattered. It didn't. She stepped forward, took it from me gently, her fingers brushing mine. She said nothing. She didn't have to. Her hand moved up to my chest, fingertips tracing the shape of my collarbone. I didn't back away. I didn't move at all. I just stood there, feeling like something inside me had unlatched. There was no moment of decision. No thought. Just surrender. My hand reached for her waist before I could stop myself. She was warm, soft, deliberate. The kiss wasn't sudden. It was slow, inevitable, full of everything we hadn't said. The space between us vanished. Her body pressed into mine, her breath syncing with mine, hands tracing lines that didn't belong to either of us. The act happened in fragments, stolen gasps, skin against skin, her fingers in my hair, mine gripping the counter. There was no finesse, just urgency. It didn't last long, but it left something raw behind. The weight of it hit harder than I thought it would. There was no victory in it. Just heat, motion, and silence. When it was over, she stepped back without looking up. She reached for her towel, wrapped herself again, and left the room without a word. I stood there, hands